I'm here in Lodi with Michael McCay of McCay Cellars. He was bottling today. What were you bottling, Mike?
Today we bottled actually 5 different lots. We are a Zinfandel producer, so we bottled Trulux Zinfandel 2009, 2009 Paisley, which is a blend, 2009 Petite Syrah, and then our new Pride Chip label called Contention, 2010.
Tell me about the Paisley, the blend. What's in that?
Paisley is a fun blend. I call it a foodie wine. By that I mean it is somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% of Petite Syrah, 55% of 4 different Zinfandels. It has nice acid, very fruit forward, balanced through the palate, very round, just a beautiful ass in the backside to pair with food.
And the Contention is a new wine for you. It's going to be the high end of your Zinfandel line. Can you tell me a little bit about the vineyard and how you're making that wine?
Contention is a Zinfandel field that Bob Laughlin grows. He's the grower in that field. It is a very special wine to me. My goal has always been to be able to try and find a Zinfandel that has a great representation of the terroir of the vineyard. Contention is about an 80-year-old vineyard. There was actually a train wreck back in 1954 that cars came off the track. It's right next to a railroad track, and spewed volcanic gravel and rock into the vineyard. So for the last 50 plus years, the disc has been driving this or pulling this volcanic rock through the vineyard, and it has a great mineral, a great dusty feel to it. The wine is unfined, unfiltered. I think it's going to be, I know it is, a very special wine. We've worked with it for a couple of years now, and each year it seems to have those same characteristics. So I decided to leave it alone, like I said, unfiltered, to be a very special wine.
Now, I find your Zinfandels tend to be extremely elegant, especially for what people would typically associate with this region. And I know you use French oak, some native yeasts, I think. Can you tell me about how you go about making the wine and if you do anything special in the vineyard in terms of picking dates?
I always look at the winery as hands-on, hands-off. Hands-on in the vineyard. We spend a lot of time in the vineyard working our different pruning practices, structuring balance between the fruit and the canopy and the vines. We spend a lot of extra effort in the vineyards to make sure that the fruit comes into the winery at harvest well balanced and ready to be crushed. I do pick on pH, not sugars. We work with 7 different Zinfandel fields. 85 or so percent of our production is Zinfandel. My goal is to have that fruit come in balanced, go through fermentation, which is about 80% native. There are a few different bottlings that we use, a little bit of inoculated yeast, just because I'm looking for certain flavor profiles out of those yeasts. But getting to that hands-off in the winery, we really don't want to touch the fruit. We're not doing binding. We're not trying to tweak wine out. We let the vineyard speak for itself. So it is absolutely hands-on in the vineyard, working on structuring that fruit when it comes into the winery, and then hands-off once we get it inside.
And speaking of vineyards, right now we're standing just outside your estate vineyard. Can you tell me about that? How large is it? How long have you been farming it? What's on it?
This is the Petite Syrah, part of the Paisley. That 45% of Petite Syrah comes from the vineyard behind me. It is a vineyard that I've worked with for almost 20 years. Petite Syrah is a difficult grape to grow. By that I mean it's tough to get it to ripen as you want it to. Typically you'll see growers have somewhere around 5-6 ton or more for Petite Syrah. We spend a lot of time getting down to about 4.5 ton per acre. The vineyard is about 10 acres. Last year we actually thinned 3 times. Petite Syrah typically tends to be a very vigorous grape. It is on 1103 rootstock, Clone 8 on the Petite Syrah. You'll see canes in the canopy get very large. Our goal is to get that fruit down to that 4.5 ton per acre. Make sure clusters aren't touching each other, pull leaves, and there's a couple tricks I've learned in the last 15 years or so in growing in this field that help get a nice balance in a different style Petite Syrah, if you will.
Now, the reds that you bottled today, those were 2010 vintage, correct?
2009
Okay,
up to the only 10 was actually contention.
contention. Okay. And how was the 2010 vintage, generally speaking, here in Lodi relative to, say, 2009?
Most winemakers and most individuals in the wine industry will tell you that 2010 was just a very special year. We had a great growing season. One thing about Zinfandel likes the heat. Lodi's heat that we get, the hotness, is actually very good for Zinfandel. What I love about the Lodi region, the AVA, is our average temperature in the evening during the summer months is actually 57 degrees. So we get these beautiful hot days, which Zinfandel loves, and at night it gets to rest, it cools down. And we had exactly that through 2010. We had some nice heat, we had beautiful cool evenings, colors beautiful. 2010 is just a spectacular year. So I'm very excited about the contention for the 2010.
And it's a little early now because the wine's still in barrel, but and was just made. But what are your thoughts on 2011?
11's an interesting year. You almost need a benchmark in 2011 for before or after the big storms. Going into crush, we worked with 7 different Zinfandel fields, and we actually had them all in before the rains. The rains came and really played havoc with the crop this past year in 2011. If you were lucky enough to be able to get your fruit in before the rains came, it was very close, very similar to 2010. But once those rains came, we had about 3 storms in a row, one big one at the end that really played havoc with the vintage.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.